When mothers leave their jobs to take care of their families, some of them may eventually want to go back to the workplace. But after time away, returning to work can feel like stepping into an entirely different world. Welcome back to the Work It podcast. My name is Nat, and as always with me is Gerald, my co-host. Now today we're going to be talking about mothers returning to work. What does it really take to return to work after months away? And when parenting pressures ramp up long after the baby years, what support truly makes a difference? Now, joining us today is Celia Au. She is a mother of 2 children, including a son with autism and ADHD, and she recently returned full-time to the workforce after a 5-year career break. Celia, welcome to the podcast.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for having me here today.
Now, I'm struck by that 5-year career break. I am imagining longer than most people.
Yes, that's right.
So before we get into that, could you walk us through what balancing work and motherhood looks like for you in your daily life now? Because I understand that your son is actually outside, like you brought him to the podcast today.
Yes, that's right. So it was a last minute thing because it rained today and the school event was cancelled. So thankfully, my boss is actually very flexible, very supportive and understanding. So she knows that sometimes such things occur, and if we do need to run off to settle our children, we are more than welcome to bring them to work, and our day-to-day still happens, I think in terms of the day-to-day schedule, it's definitely very intense, right? Because
So
in the past...
is today like a special day? Like this is not something that happens often.
No, thankfully, yeah. So on a normal day, with my husband's support, right, we'll wake up, we'll get the kids ready, then I will prep myself, and I wake up earlier so that I can cook a warm breakfast for my daughter because she likes to eat something savory. And then after that, I'll drive the kids to school, and then I'll go down to work. After that, depending on the kids' schedule, I'll fetch one of them, I'll rush home, I'll cook a fresh meal for them, and then after that go through their homework, clean the house, do the laundry, dishes, etc.
Wow.
before jumping into bed. Yeah.
Lots of action on the day.
Yes, that's right.
But I can imagine it's so much tougher the first time that you had to, change your lifestyle to accommodate becoming a mother. So walk us through what happened when you first became a mother or decided to become a mother, and what you felt it meant for your career back then.
I was also working in a company that had very good HR policies. But I'll be very honest and say that, policies aside, it also depends very much on whether you have the right manager. During that period, my boss was actually nice and supportive in a sense that she wouldn't contact me after hours and all. But honestly, I did feel the stress because there were moments when she used to make comments about other colleagues, taking time off to settle their kids who fell sick. So, and you can't control when one falls sick, right? So I definitely felt that pressure that I had to step up, but at the same time, I couldn't because I was pregnant.
It's usually these side comments
Yes,
that
that's
really
right.
inform the culture in the workplace, right?
Yeah.
Because when you're asking for time off, that's like an official request. It's like a yes or no thing. But when you hear on the side that they're saying, wow, this person's sick again, their child's sick again, wow, they need to take time off for their family again, then that's really what makes you feel like you shouldn't be asking for time off.
I think for the mother, it's quite difficult as well because there is this part of your life that's being split. Your attention, it's not just the work, there's also the family, the children that you have to think about, and it's not easy to balance that. So I think such comments could make the mother feel guilty.
Was that how you felt when you did have to ask for time off, when you did have to let them know you wouldn't be around as much because you were
Yes.
dealing with a pregnancy?
That's right. There was definitely lots of uncertainty and fear, right? And of course, then I would also worry, like, will I even do well for my appraisal, right? Will it be on me that I took too much leave that year, To be very honest, I had heard from my friends, that, they take extended maternity leave and all. And I thought, that was such a luxury, like maybe I would want to, to spend more time. And my company actually had such a policy.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so my company had very solid HR policies. But I was very scared to ask for it because of the way my manager back then had behaved, So, that was the fear that I had.
Yeah, this was something that I talked about with Minister Indrani Raja on this podcast when she came on to talk about the culture in the workplace with regards to employees or workers deciding to have kids. And that really is core to the issue that if you have all these policies, but the language that you use, maybe the culture that you set isn't quite accommodating, it doesn't really matter. Because
Exactly.
nobody will want to raise their hand and say, I want to take more time off if they know they're going to be discriminated for that. Yeah. So how did you deal with that?
I pretty much worked all the way till I had to go on maternity leave. Yeah, so it was only towards the end when things got very heavy and you can't really walk and all, and it was more of a medical concern. And then the doctor said, okay, you really have to go on bed rest. Then I stopped.
So you had your daughter first,
That's right.
Yeah.
and then you had your son,
That's right.
and then that spanned 5 years of a break.
Correct.
Okay. So what was going through your mind when you first decided that you were going to take such a long time off of work?
I never wanted to take a career break. I love my job so much.
But
And
we can see that. We can see that because the way you were going at it,
yeah, and to be very frank, when I had to make that decision, I really felt that it was a forced decision. My late mother was the caregiver to my kids, and she passed away very abruptly during COVID. And during that period, there was that semi-lockdown, and there was also a ban on anyone coming to Singapore, which included the foreign domestic workers. So I was unable to get a helper, right? And so I felt that I was forced to quit. So the idea that I had was that, sure, no worries, I'll quit, I'll look after the kids even though I didn't want to, and when things kind of stabilize, I'll go back. So there was never a plan that was going to be a long journey kind of thing. To me, it was, okay, the moment borders open, that's it, I'm going back to work, But it was during that first few weeks that I spent all that time alone with my kids, and I spent a lot of time with my son, that I realized something was not quite right with him. The amount of tantrums, meltdown, crying, clinginess, and I just felt, this is not right. This is not normal. The terrible tools or what. So I told my husband, I said, I suspect something's not right. And of course, with Google and all, start searching, right? And I just knew something wasn't normal, and I went to the doctor and I said I would like to get a referral to a specialist, and finally they came back to say that he's got mild autism, but in addition to that he's also got ADHD.
Right.
So as much as we had kind of already expected that since we were on that journey, but to finally get that verdict, right, was very, very shocking, honestly. And of course, as a mother, to me was, what did I do wrong? And that hit me really hard. And then of course the first thing that I asked myself was, oh no, what's going to happen? Do I get to work again? I've always been so driven at work, and suddenly, to be relegated to just be a housewife in that sense. Oh, it really hit me very hard, Yeah, and at the same time, I was very lucky because I had a very good relationship with my ex-bosses, and they were very supportive. So my ex-boss at the Singapore Cancer Society, right, he was the one who was always thinking of me, and he said, oh, we have this opening here and we have this opening there. Do you want to come back? I was very appreciative, because the truth was I was not capable enough to handle those portfolios. They were in other areas, not in the area that I was specializing in.
It wasn't the same job that you left, basically.
Yeah, but they were willing to get me in, And I said, thank you, and I really appreciate that. But I think to be fair to the company, you ought to hire the right person with the right skills,
Right.
So I left it as that and all. Interestingly, my boss came back again to me to tell me, hey, we need someone to help with our anniversary. And I had worked on the anniversary with them 5 years back, right? And he said, we need someone. Can you come in? We'll accommodate your schedule. In fact, you don't even have to come in. You can work from home. If there are meetings, then you can either dial in or come in. But in me, I was like, no way, I want to get out of my house. I want to be in the office, you know what I mean? So then I said, no, why not I go into the office? I'm willing to go in every day, but just in the morning. So when my kids are in school, I'll be in the office. So sometimes I brought my kids in, so my son will sit there and, then they'll come, oh, do you want Milo? And also, I felt guilty because other people didn't bring their kids to work, right? But they were willing to accommodate me and all. So it felt really nice. And because of that, even though it was supposed to be just a morning thing, right? Whenever they needed me to come in to do presentations to the board, to handle other things, and they even offered me to help out in another portfolio, I said yes. Because if you're not calculative with me, I'm not going to be calculative back with you. I will do more than expected.
What was the the motivation or the moment that you decided, part-time was great, they were accommodating, but I really want to look for something full-time. I want to get back into the workplace full-time.
I think I've always wanted to look full-time, to be very honest. It's just that because the kids were young at that time, and I hadn't really settled my son. Now I'm confident going back full-time, but at the same time also then when I apply for a job, I've been very honest and very upfront that, I'm returning from a sabbatical because I had to settle my kids. And for companies that shortlisted me, I made it very clear upfront that I have a child with special needs,
Right.
So it was not something that, a secret or what. I want to be very honest and upfront.
Okay.
So now's the right time.
So that's the part that I think I'm most curious about. Your time away, 5 years, going back to looking for a job, that must have been quite a shock, right?
Quite daunting, I must admit, yes.
So how was it like? How different was the job market and, the job interview process, looking for a job and all that compared to the last time that you had to do all of that?
Right. So I think it spans even more than 5 years because, I haven't looked for a job even before then, right?
Yeah.
And I think firstly, in terms of the job search engines, very new to me. So in terms of where to even start, I was kind of stumped, to be very honest. The first thing I did was actually to send out feelers to ask people, hey, do you know if anyone's looking for a person like me, to join the team and all. And then, of course, updating the resume, right?
Yeah.
And the CV, right? I mean, the cover letter to explain my situation. It was quite depressing, because I felt that I was quite accomplished, but I felt that so-called sabbatical kind of, or rather it would mar the whole entire experience
Yeah.
when I put it on paper.
So what did you put there? Because this is a really common question. People who take breaks and then they
Yes.
wonder, how do I explain that break in the resume?
I was very upfront, so I shared all my experience, and my final paragraph was to say that, I have been on a sabbatical, and this was because I was busy looking after my 2 kids to put them through PSLE. But at the same time also because I did keep myself busy by volunteering at my
Volunteering,
daughter's
yes.
school, right? So it wasn't like I was just at home, I took the time to then get involved in like school activities, so events management roles, public speaking. I learned how to use Canva, which is like so common these days, right? But during my days, not as common, what I
Yeah.
mean? So sometimes simple things that's so common for people is big for me,
Yeah.
and of course during my time, AI didn't quite exist, right?
Oh, yes. That's the
Yeah.
big thing that happened while you were away.
Correct. Yeah, and now there's AI. So interestingly, when I was interviewed, one of the board directors asked me, do you use AI for work? So as a comms professional, we pride ourselves on writing everything from scratch, right? Because
Yes.
it's in the creative line, you want to be proud of your own work. But then I also understood that, times have evolved. You need to leverage on AI to get ahead.
Yeah, it's no
Right.
longer a crutch, it's a competency.
Correct. And of course, at the back of my mind was always, people still want me. I've been out of action for so long, right? There's definitely going to be someone who is maybe younger or cheaper, right? In that sense. So I had to also lower my expectations. I told my husband, I said, look, I'm definitely not going to be able to get a job with the kind of pay that I had back then, right? Because things
Yeah.
have evolved so much. And I said, I think as long as we can make ends meet, as long as I can get my sanity back on track, and feel accomplished, that I can contribute meaningfully to society, I think that was at least what I wanted
Right.
first.
How different was it going back to work full time compared to the 5 years that you spent away and focusing on your family?
I think the first challenge I had was information overload, right?
Okay.
Because you have to know everything about the company inside out. So one of the key things that I did was to tell my boss, if there were opportunities for me to come in earlier before my start date, please let me join in your meetings or events, And she was very nice to allow me to do that. And I said, if you could just start copying me in all your emails so that at least on the first day I don't get a shock. I get to read things for about a week prior to that so that I get the hang of things, that would be very helpful, But I would say that, there's so much information to absorb, and then of course building relationship, with new colleagues of different ages. Yeah. So these are things that you think, again, it's so common, right? But you have to unlearn and relearn new skills in that sense. Yeah.
What was the most difficult thing for you going back in?
I think it was really managing my time at home, to be honest. I think when you're a stay-at-home mom, you can have breaks anytime, right? Yeah. So I think when I first went back, I felt really exhausted, and it reminded me of my late mother, who used to look after us, but she also had a full-time job, and it made me realize that, wow, it's really hard for a lot of women, and there's so many women out there who don't have helpers. In fact, we have a colleague, in fact, two of my other directors do not have helpers at home, and then when I heard it, I was like, wow, that's really inspiring. You have such a high level job, and yet you still go home every day and you look after your kids and you cook and you wake up. One of them will wake up at like 4 a.m., to just manage her day. Mad respect for them, honestly, and I know there are a lot of other women who are like that too.
Obviously, we are very cognizant of the fact that Gerald and I are both men, talking about women going back to work. The first thing that I had on my mind when we were coming up with this episode, with the topic for this episode, was what's so different about a woman going back to work after maternity leave versus a father taking paternity leave and then going back to the workplace?
On a personal level, I would say that it's same but different.
Okay.
Now, I have a colleague, who's very involved, and eventually he decided to quit his job and move overseas with his wife because he wanted to look after his kids. When he left, even though people used nice words, of course it was very judgmental.
Yeah.
Everyone was like, oh, and someone, he was like an ex-ACS boy, and people were like, why would you want to throw away your career like this and all? But the truth is, time has evolved. Gentlemen of our era are no longer like our forefathers. A lot of them are very hands-on. My husband made it a point to get very involved in diaper changing. So when I had my kid, I would wake up in the middle of the night. He will tap me down and says, no, I will do it. Because he knew that I'll wake up to like breastfeed and all, and I'll be exhausted. But he made it a point.
Right.
And he gets involved in the kids' activities. He will bring them out for one-to-one play dates. Sneak in the McDonald's ice cream that I don't allow. That kind of thing. So men are very involved these days. So they do get judged. Honestly, and I do hear this from some of my male friends also, like, oh, but if I do this, I don't know whether I can get that promotion now because I'll be taking time off. Whereas for women, then it's a different thing, right? Because then people do then judge. Again, it's a societal thing that, can you then cope? Will you get emotional? Can you balance things out, etc.? Will you need to disappear more? And for women, the journey is so varied, right? Because it's not just about returning to work. A lot of us want to try and continue the breastfeeding journey.
Yes.
So being in the office, sometimes you have to step away even more. And then again, if the child falls sick again, things like that crop up. So it's same but yet different. Yeah.
I do see that moving forward, families, the parents, both husband and wives, would need to have that conversation, and also to manage what we call like the family design, life design together, not just your role and my role, but rather how do we create the life that is best for our family, and how does work revolve around that life. I know I've heard of husbands who would become the stay home because the wives are earning more than them, right? And of course they do get a lot of comments there, but I feel that if that's the life design that they're working towards, then perhaps that will be something that will keep them grounded rather than listen to the expectations of others.
Exactly. And when I scroll the internet, there are a lot of men who give up their good paying jobs, meaning that it's not necessarily that the wife earns more, but they made that sacrifice because they want and they understand and they want to play a larger role in their child's growing up. Yeah. So, again, mad respect for such men, So society has evolved a lot, and I think when they are then ready to go back to work, so they're not just mothers going back to work, right, but men going back to work, we then need a society that's mature and ready to accept them back.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's good that you brought it up, because the next question I had is based on your experience and your observations as well of how different family dynamics are becoming, how people are evolving to think more about life rather than just work. What do you think needs to change in the employer's side of things to match the needs or desires in the market for their workers?
I think in terms of HR policies, a lot of companies have good policies and good frameworks, right? But I think as a society, we have to first ask ourselves, right, how can we shift the way the culture is in Singapore? This is not a case of dangling the carrot in front of people to say that, I'll give you company subsidies or more payouts, etc. Because honestly, when you want to have a child, it's a long, it's a lifetime thing that
For
we're
sure.
talking about, right? And it doesn't just stop at this one company, etc. So I think it really boils down to training individuals to have that mindset change. You know, be more accepting. And then again, this is not about mothers or fathers. You know, I know of a lot of youngsters who are caregivers to their siblings, right? Maybe their parents are gone or their parents are very old and they're caregivers. You know, in this day and age, pets are so important. You know, I know of companies that have parents leave,
Yes.
right? And that's
Yes.
remarkable. I mean, that's a good development in where we are right now because, you know, for some people they might not want to have kids, right? And then their pets become very important. We need to respect that also. But I think it's a very collective effort across the board, you know. And to really reach out to people to get them to understand that, you know, it's a mindset shift, and as a group we have to come together to make that society a positive one for anyone and everyone.
Right. For those who perhaps are just about to go back to work, right? And they're worried about their first day in, dealing with their manager again after some time away, dealing with their colleagues. Do you have any advice for them?
How I approached it was, number one, keep a very open mind. And when I say keep a very open mind, is that you have to be very flexible, that whatever was discussed, you know, so say for example, you're going back after maternity leave, right? Then you might have an idea of how things were, right? And or if you're like myself going back to work, you know, maybe the job description said one thing, but be very open and be flexible that when you return, things might not be the same. That's number one. Number two, you have to be very open that sometimes your boss might be on top of things and be checking on you a bit more. I don't think it's micromanagement. You know, it could be this, they want to help you in your transition back. Be very open that, you know, when you're returning back, you know, sometimes not everyone wants to hang out with you. Don't take it personally, you know, that kind of thing. But most importantly, I would say is that at least for the week or two prior to going back to work, read up as much as you can. And when I say read up, it's not just about the work. Read up about what's happening in the news. You know, a lot of times people get so fixated with their personal life, right? And then with social media, they're just scrolling through other type of content. But I think it's very important to know current affairs, what's happening around us in society, etc. So at least, you know, when you go back, you have intellectual conversations to have. You know what's happening on the ground, etc. You can still connect with people, and conversations are what gets things going, right? So I think it's important to do that so that, you know, you're still relevant, as you have correctly mentioned, Gerald.
Right. Well, that's a nice plug for CNA at the end there. Thank you for that. But yeah, thank you so much, Celia, for sharing all of this. You have a very inspiring story.
Thank you so much for having me here today.
Yeah, I really hope that, you know, some of our viewers, our listeners will be able to take away what you said, maybe apply it in their own instances, having to go back to work, whether they are mothers or fathers or, you know, anyone taking time off from the workplace to take a career break, take a sabbatical or anything.
That's right.
Hey, it's the Ask Work It segment of the podcast. If you have an issue in the workplace that you can't solve, you don't know who to turn to, why not write to us and we might be able to help you with your problem. Gerald, today's question comes in from a listener by the name of OOO or Triple O.
Oh no.
But this OO stands for something. She says it's overloaded with work, overwhelmed by work, and feeling overworked.
Wow. Okay. There's a lot of story behind this
Just
person.
to set the context of what she's writing into us for, right? So,
You call it triple O?
Triple O.
Okay.
Yeah, Triple O. So, Triple O is in her mid-40s. She's been working in a public healthcare organization for the past 5 years. She was originally hired for a strategic planning role, but after her original boss left, she was moved into different reporting lines and eventually transferred into a completely different department. Today, being a manager, she is effectively a one-person team handling two separate functions alone because of budget and manpower constraints. So she says she's overwhelmed by the workload and increasingly questioning whether she is even suited for the role because she has had no prior experience in the area to begin with. So the question she's asking is, what now? It's a very loaded question with a lot of context to unpack here, Gerald. Where
Overloaded
should we
with
start?
work, overwhelmed with work, feeling overworked. Wow, I think for Triple O, it really sounds like the workload has been very, very overwhelming, especially being a single contributor.
Yeah.
But it's the reality, right? For many people, even across whether it's public healthcare or even many other sectors, there are many people I met who tell me that they're struggling with work, struggling with the heavy workloads, and they don't know what to do, right?
If we were to be in Triple O's position, what would be the first thing that you would try to do to avoid burning out?
I think asking for more resources, and even though your boss might say we don't have that resource, somehow you got to find a way to make the work more fitting and easier to do. I always personally say that you sometimes need to keep knocking on your boss's door, because in a very busy state of work, usually your manager's priorities may not be to elevate the difficulty. They're just trying to keep the business and the lights running. You see.
They got their own thing to focus on aside from your work.
So you got to kind of keep knocking in a gentle way, of course, not like irritating way.
Okay.
Or sometimes maybe irritating my work for the boss. All right. Keep asking and maybe keep thinking that there must be a better way to do this. If I'm Triple O, I will make sure that I won't let this become the status quo, because sometimes we even let this sense of busyness become routine. And we tell ourselves we have to grow to accept and grow to survive this, you see.
Right.
When it sometimes may not be sustainable in the long run.
Right. So we kind of place the onus on, getting past this tough situation on ourselves, even though it's an environmental issue.
Yes. And the fact that this Triple O is working in a service-related industry where health is involved, right? There's public health safety to also take note of, because if she is not well taken care of, it could affect her work quality, which could affect people who are in pain, who are in need of healthcare. So I would say that this is pretty dire. I know the reality, like you mentioned, it's not 100% controllable. There's a lack of resources. We can't do anything here and there. But Triple really has to find a way, and to work with a supervisor to find a way to make the situation better.
Right. There's one thing that really struck me in her letter to us. It's that she outlined that she is wondering whether she's even suited for the role because, to begin with, she had no prior experience doing this.
Yeah.
Which is baffling to me, because she is essentially a one-person department handling two completely different job functions, and she has no experience.
I'm glad you brought that up, because when you see her experience, it sounds like she's just being pushed into different job roles, almost like a square in trying to be fitting into different shapes, different packs, different shape packs to make things work. It may not be the most efficient use of her abilities. She was brought in for a strategic role, and then now she has to do operations and handle operations on her own.
Yep.
Right? It's almost like this may not be the best analogy, but it makes me feel like she's asking a fish to climb a tree. All right, but I'm sure she's doing her best. But it may not be the best use of her potential and her skill sets, you see. So I'm also wondering, like, for Triple O, is part of her challenge also not just the workload, but also coming from the place where she's not optimized.
So I wonder how bad of a piece of advice it would be to tell her to just threaten to quit. Because it feels like if she alone is handling two different job functions as a one-person department, I feel like she has some leverage to the bosses to be like, hey, give me more resources or you will need much more resources. Is that a conversation that you can have in any politically correct manner?
I think and in this type of situations, right, any option should be kept as an option.
Okay.
So that's one possible option that she should take, especially if she has favor.
Yeah.
If she has favor and she knows she's indispensable in a way, right? Then maybe she can negotiate and assert on that basis. And maybe the team manager is like, okay, if you're not here, just find another person. And another person just to fit in. It's okay.
Yeah, also considering that she was forced into this role with no prior experience, they could easily just pull anyone else into it.
It could be a case of next better player. Your turn is over now, another person just comes in. So I think for Triple O, really, really taking a step back first, to ask herself, like, is there any control that she can have over this situation, to evaluate, is this the best place for her? Because if she knows that this is a suitable place for her, she can learn and grow, and she's doing work that she finds meaningful and also purposeful, aligned with her skill sets and her potential, then maybe it's worthwhile to figure out how to make this work.
Right.
But if today you are feeling like you're thrown in a fire, you are not equipped, a lot of the things that you're doing is not aligned with what you want, you feel like you're constantly using your your less dominant hand, if I may, less dominant hand to work instead of natural right hand to work on things, then, maybe another way of thinking would be, is there some place better for me?
Apply yourself to something that would better suit
yes,
where you want to be in life.
maybe within the organization, because a healthcare organization is huge, right? You may not need to move companies.
Right.
You can move within the departments and then start to be intentional about that thought, meaning that, okay, while I try to survive here today, I need to know that tomorrow on the long midterm, I should not be here. And start to engineer conversations, do some planning, do some networking strategically, so that you kind of inch your way, pivot your way towards something newer and better for you, right? If let's say there's no opportunities within your organization, look elsewhere. Public healthcare is great because they are big. There are many institutions and all connected. So I've seen cases where people actually move healthcare institutions,
Right.
in search of something that they find more fitting for them.
If her boss is maybe on some level someone that she can talk to, how would you recommend bringing up that conversation to say, hey, this right now is not working for me?
Yeah, I think whether Triple O goes up to a boss to be open about the struggle to cope with the work, if that's honesty is possible, then great. If not, sometimes it comes out as a performance issue, because you can't handle everything at one go. Then maybe that looking at opportunities where mistakes are made and then using those opportunities to say that, boss, I really cannot.
Yeah.
Because the mistakes are showing up already. The other way, of course, is to really look at it from a more positive angle, to look at it and say, how can we make this better? Like, you've got all your appraisals, you've got your work reviews. Because Triple O is in charge of the whole workflow and all the tasks, right? She can come up with some ideas, some ways to refine the process, to make things more efficient. I think that could be one of the value add on how to do this. Sometimes it might involve restructuring a bit of their work processes with other teams. So maybe even knowing what other people are doing and how can some of these processes be fine-tuned could become useful. But like I said, these things do take time. And,
For sure.
between your daily work that you're barely surviving and thinking about more progressive kinds of work to do corrective, longer term gains kind of work, Triple O has to balance, has to figure out. If I'm Triple O, what I might want to do is I will let my boss think about that strategic piece, flag out the issues and let my boss think along with me, like, what can we do about this?
Right.
My responsibility is to do the job and to make sure that we don't burn, right, in our daily operations. But I need you to help me to see this thing in the long run. How can we do this better so that both of us will benefit?
Right. So not exactly going to the boss with a kind of a blank check situation where you just say, I am having a problem, but you do direct them towards a solution, just letting them know that with all of your work right now, you can't work towards refining the steps to take to make that situation a reality.
Yeah, I don't want to just sound like I'm citing bosses, but the truth is they've got to kind of manage upward and downwards as well.
Yeah.
So if today's solutions can come from the ground, then it helps them to kind of like not have to be burdened that much, but rather think about, if this makes sense, then let me try to do my part to work upwards to get this thing done. I feel that sometimes the best solutions come from the ground.
So, Triple O, I hope that our discussion here was helpful for you. If you have to have that conversation with your manager, we hope that you're able to take the best parts of our conversation and kind of tailor it to your own situation. But if you have to seek greener pastures, well, all the best. We would love to hear from you if you manage to do that. For the rest of you who are watching, tuning in, or listening, if you have a problem similar to Triple O's, or if you have anything that you want to discuss with us here on the Work It Podcast, you can write to us at cnapodcast@mediacorp.com.sg or comment wherever you are listening from.
I'm Gerald.
And I'm Nat. Stop running on empty and start running towards joy.